Good morning and welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm your host, Justine Reichman. With me today is Greg Wilson. He is the founder of HempWorld. Welcome, Greg.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm so pleased to have you here. I've heard so much about what you're doing, and I'm excited to share it with our community. I mean, just now, you just told me you were a serial entrepreneur. It's your eighth one. So, from the get-go, I'm curious. As a serial entrepreneur, do you just think it's in your DNA that
Oh
like
yeah, well, I'm not good at working for people, so I got to figure something out.
right. So have they all been in this space?
Not all, but the most successful ones have been. Um, I started in college working in building materials, studying engineering and Chinese. So I went over to China, and when I was studying there, I did an internship in a bamboo flooring mill,
Oh,
and that turned into coming back and graduating, selling my car, buying a plane ticket, and starting a company that went public.
wow. Congratulations. That's a big deal. So, wow, there's so much to go on there for, the people that are listening and watching and want to learn more about how to become a successful entrepreneur, especially when you started off like while you're in college. But let's go back a little bit. Tell everybody a little bit about your background. And let's just kick it off a little bit with how you got into this specific industry today.
Okay, well, I've always been the outdoorsy person. So I was always the kid that was in the creek catching crawfish and just wanting to be outside, hiking and biking and camping and things. And then when I went to college, I did very well in math. I did not do well in the reading and writing part. And so they asked if I spoke a second language. The answer was no. So I took that as a challenge to learn Chinese because I figured an engineer who speaks Chinese can kind of write his own ticket. So that's how I got started getting into building materials, coming from a building family, and then going to China while I was in college and trying to solve a problem of how to make bamboo flooring harder so you could actually use it for flooring without having dings and dents in it.
So I know that you do a lot in building materials, and I know from the limited conversation that we had before this that a lot of it goes back to being sustainable, and equally some of it is around agriculture. And I'd love to know how that fits into what you're doing and why did you focus on that?
Well, so loving the outdoors means I wanted to do something that was more in the natural building material space because I did an internship also in college working as a line engineer or assistant line engineer for vinyl siding. And I thought that that was actually just disgusting. Seeing all of the different petroleum and different stuff that they put into your home. And I didn't think that was right. So I wanted to work on something that would actually be a solution. So I started working with the bamboo. Um, and I actually got really sick from dealing with the formaldehyde that's used in wood flooring and in bamboo flooring. Been hospitalized a bunch of times with my lungs. So that led me to doing this one on my own terms and using soy instead of formaldehyde as the bonding agent to hold together the hempwood. So learning what I learned with the bamboo that was relatively successful and then fixing the inherent problems in it of something that actually grows faster and is better for the environment, hemp rather than bamboo, and then using soy instead of formaldehyde because I didn't want to have my coworkers getting sick like I did, and I still have those respiratory problems. I'm still on a payment plan for my last lung treatment in 2021. It was that bad. And so when hemp became legal in the United States with the 2014 Farm Bill, and I knew the process that we had developed, which is actually based off of the Fibonacci sequence. Our company's
Okay,
name
so
is
for
really
those
named.
that are not familiar with the Fibonacci sequence, can you just break that down for us in layman's terms?
The Fibonacci sequence is nature's algorithm. So it's the second most common number in nature. It's how every plant grows, every blade of grass, every leaf on a tree, because it's the most efficient use of space. So behind pi, which is a circle, is phi, which is the most efficient use of space. And so the Fibonacci sequence is the carbon sequestration ratio of plants. 161% of carbon is required to grow 1 unit of cellulose, as well as the compression ratio for making all of the different products that I've invented, like the strand woven bamboo, eucalyptus, smart oak, and now hempwood.
Wow. So by making these products that are all plant based, what is the impact that that's having on the environment? Do you have any statistics you could share?
Absolutely. So you can talk about the environment outdoors, where we're the only true carbon negative flooring material in the world. And that's because we use our waste as our energy source for the mill. So our bio burner uses our waste hemp to create our thermal energy. And then we have hydro and solar electric to power the mill. Um, to the farming practices, where you're not allowed to use fertilizers or pesticides or herbicides that you typically use in agriculture, like row crops, corn and beans and wheat, because actually the government hasn't regulated it
Mhm.
to allow any of the approved products on it. So you technically have to grow it organically because you're not allowed to spray it with anything.
Mhm.
So the farming practices are regenerative, just in their inherent nature of being a net benefit for the soil and not spraying anything on it. Using a plant based adhesive to replace petroleum with the soy is upcycling soy that after they squeeze out the oil for making biodiesel, we use the flour as our protein source for our adhesive to inside of the mill, not having any of our employees getting sick from being around dirty chemicals or the installers putting it into your home, as well as the people that are actually living in that home not having any VOCs, volatile organic compounds, that leach out into people's homes whenever you have dirty chemicals in there. So it's literally the healthiest, most sustainable flooring in the world.
Wow. So you've been doing this flooring now for how long?
My journey to where I am now began in 1996. So you're talking 28 years when I started laying flooring in our family business because my family are builders. And so before I could drive a car, I was helping lug boxes of wood flooring into houses for the family business and then learning how to install them, to studying building material engineering in college starting in 2000. I actually went to an academy of manufacturing, so engineering high school, one of the STEM schools, where I studied literally what I'm doing now. I then went to college and did the same thing. Um, to starting my first business in 2003, which is now 21 years ago or so, working with this strand woven bamboo, to then going to business school. I ended up going to Harvard and jumped out and started my own business because when I signed over the intellectual property from the first one, they agreed to pay me to go to school anywhere I could get into it in the world. So 2011, I finished there, and then invented HempWood in 2014.
Wow.
Filed the patents in 2016, built the first mill in 2018, built the second mill in 2021, and now we're building a third one.
How much of the landscape of the country do you have that has access to this?
So all of our raw materials come from less than 100 miles from our facility. Actually, we have over 80% of them that are grown right here in Callaway County in Murray, Kentucky. All of our soy, which comes from the processing mills, they're within about 200 miles of us. And then some of our other components come from West Virginia, which is our neighboring state as well. So all of our raw materials come from within a short distance because that helps with your carbon calculation. And then we ship our product all over the United States straight to the job site. So instead of having a middleman that you have to sell it to a retail store that then sells it to somebody, we just find somebody who's really interested in healthy, sustainable materials. Typically for residential, it's somebody who's in the healthcare field that knows about all the dirty shit that they're putting into your house and say, I don't want to have that. Or commercially, we sell all over the US and we're finding our best commercial customers are universities and schools because having improved indoor air quality by not having any VOCs leads to higher cognitive ability and higher test scores.
That's amazing. So, what percentage of the country do you have at the moment that has access or that is leveraging this? And how large is that pie that you still want to reach out to?
We have sold to all 48 states of the lower states as well as Hawaii. We also sell into Canada, Europe, Australia, Japan. So it's getting out there. This is technically our 6th year of manufacturing product. We've done about 1.4 million square feet that's sold out there. You have probably 500 square feet is about the average job that you do. And so that means you've got a couple of thousand installs that have gone not only in the United States, but all over the place.
Do you have any additional information that you know, besides from yourself and the impact that you were having from all the stuff that was on all the other materials? So, have there been any studies done or anything further that you could share about the impact of being able to have better for you resources as you build out, whether it's homes, whether it's residential or commercial?
Yes, absolutely. So we have our LCA, life cycle analysis, and our environmental product declaration, which is key to proving your carbon footprint. We also have an HPD, which is a health product declaration that shows your off-gassing standards and any sort of dirty things that might be in your product, as well as the declare label, which declares that I'm not using any forever chemicals. So for our product, we have all of these tests and they're verified by ASTM, a third party. And then we actually team up with the United Soybean Board, who sponsors a lot of our research for the adhesive, and the American Lung Association. So they send me to New York, California, all over the place speaking about this because there are studies dating back to the 70s showing the effects of dirty building materials inside of your home. And that's what has started to get a lot of the products that are cheaper and perform better in some element, but also cause cancer, like lead paint, like vinyl chloride, which is your LVP fluorine, luxury vinyl fluorine, is actually made from one of the most hazardous chemicals you can deal with. It was developed for gas warfare in World War I, and now it's in 60% of the fluorine sold in the United States. And the EPA has finally declared it as a hazardous chemical, even though they noted it under Nixon in 1970 that the off gassing from PVC or vinyl chloride is horrendous for you. So the word's getting out there. They're having all of these tests and studies that are done by the National Institute of Health, NIH, Harvard Chan School of Medicine, and a lot of these different places that are saying, hey, look, having dirty chemicals inside of your home, inside of your classroom, things like that, are proving to be hazardous. And one of the reasons that all of these different asthma, allergies, cancers are coming about when people aren't smoking anymore. Like, what the hell's going on? And the reality is that we've known it for a long time, but it's a lot more profitable to do something else.
You know what's interesting? One of the things is people went to luxury vinyl flooring because they didn't want to use wood, right? Because they didn't want to use more wood and stuff like that. And that's a lot more hazardous than the stuff they were using before. And now there seems to be, from what you're saying, an alternate, right? That is plant forward, that is healthier. So I'm wondering, it took a while for people to get on board with the luxury vinyl flooring, right? What do you think the runway or the time frame would be for the majority of people to get on board with this? I mean, what are some of the challenges you face when you try to sell this in?
Well, price and profitability. So the reason LVP is everywhere is not because people want it. It's not because it performs better.
Is it cheap?
Luxury vinyl plank costs between 40 and 80 cents a square foot to make, and people pay between $3 and $7 a square foot for it. So every time you have another link in the supply chain of selling a product like flooring, you have a 200x multiplier. So if you have a factory in Cambodia or Vietnam where it's all made, because China has tariffs on it and it doesn't fit that model of making so much money anymore,
Mhm.
all the mills moved to Cambodia and Vietnam. And actually, LVP was invented by one of my bamboo customers. I'm
Really?
very Yeah, very close with the son of them. They were bought by Shaw, and they sold their company for hundreds of millions of dollars. And then they stepped down when all of the things came out because China actually banned vinyl chloride in use in public manufacturing spaces in 2020 as part of their Clean Air Act. And it was all moved to the Muslim region of China, the Uruguayans. And so the US has stopped allowing that material coming in because it's using, I don't know how dirty you want to go into it, but it's using slave labor to make something cheaper and then sending that compounded material to Vietnam or Cambodia to make the finished good, the flooring. That way you get around the tariffs. So it's a money grab. When you can make something for 50 cents and the customer pays $10 or $5 for it, that means there's an importer, there's a distributor, there's a retailer, there's the contractor that's all making money along the lines there.
Hmm.
And you make a lot more money doing things like that. And so that's why LVP's out there. It's
Right.
not because it performs better, it looks better. Nobody says, I want to buy a house with plastic flooring. When you advertise your house, you say it's got wood flooring, it's got granite countertops.
Right.
But when everybody along the line can make double margins on what they're doing as the natural products, then you don't have the reach. It's the same way in foods. You probably see the same thing where you have the type
Well,
of
you
food
are
that
using
people,
foods, right? You're using hemp. I mean, you're using plants,
yeah,
right? So it's
absolutely.
it's just to create a different product. It's not to create something consumable. It's to create something that is sustainable that we live within, and we want to have a healthy life, right? Given your experience with your lungs. But
Hmm.
anyway, my point was just that it's still food, right? It's still made with food. It's still plant forward, and it's part of that whole theme and why many people are going back to that because they know it's more transparent.
Oh, absolutely. Everybody wants to know where their food comes from.
Right.
And so we promote that exact same atmosphere because I live on an organic farm here in Western Kentucky. So my wife and I live on a 171-acre organic farm. It's technically permaculture set up. So we have fruits, vegetables, cows, pigs, chickens, berries, mushrooms, all these different type of things that actually are self-sustaining because I'm not really good at farming. But you can go out and pick the same blueberries right outside the door there year year after year. And so people want to know where your food comes from. Why shouldn't people know where your building materials come from? Because if you don't know, that means somebody's probably doing something to make more money out of it that they're not telling you about. I mean, that's the cold hard fact that in where we live right now, everything is bought and paid for. Whether it's your politician, whether it's your corporate CEO,
Mhm.
or whether it's your local, I don't know, your local stores. Like the
Right.
more local you get, the better it is because you can say, oh, like those vegetables that I showed you earlier, the farmer who grew those vegetables also grew our hemp. And I stopped over to check on the hemp and they said, hey, here's some foods that weren't able to go to one of their larger buyers, one of the larger supermarkets around here. And instead they said, you don't care what the food looks like. Here, this is free. And so I'm trading them some of the meats that we had here on our farm, and they give me vegetables on theirs. And you know who the people are, you know what they put on it, you know how it was done.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So I'm curious, you built this company, it's your eighth company. As a founder, was there anything you did differently with this company from lessons learned from the past?
Use your own money as long as you can, because once you sell the majority of your company, somebody else owns you. So if you can develop your product or proof of concept and have your intellectual property approved, then all of a sudden your valuation goes way up and you can raise capital to the tune of not having to be a minority owner in your own business. So not everybody has the luxury of doing that. Right now, I haven't been paid for 6 years. Now that's easier to say once you've done it a couple times before,
Right.
but that is really, really hard. And so the farther you can take it without having to get investors involved, the more likely you are going to be running your own company later on. Always do what's right, not what's more profitable in the short term. Because if you do what's more profitable in the short term, then that will come back and bite you in the long run. And you won't be living and doing what you want to do because you're going to have compromised what your actual ambition or intentions were from the get go. And so it is always harder to do the right thing. But doing the wrong thing means you're not going to stick around for so long. Just like the vinyl flooring guys, the guys that developed that built it up and got out quick. But now everybody's starting to realize about how dirty vinyl chloride is. Like that train that wrecked in Ohio last year, that was headed to a vinyl flooring mill. And that's what finally set off the EPA because of public outrage to say, hey, we shouldn't be having that material in our neighborhoods. And so doing what's right and not compromising your values is absolutely important, even if that does cause it to be more difficult than it could have been.
In the next few years, what do you hope to see both for the company and the impact on a more global level?
We are in the plans of building a HempWood in the Netherlands in Europe. So that means you won't have to send something over the ocean. We're actually shipping a container to Belgium next week. So that is something that's really exciting, being able to have it locally made in Europe.
Do you work with
Um,
farmers over there already?
yes.
Yes. And
Yep.
so what was that
So
process like, being that you're over here? Were some of the rules and regulations different that you had to accommodate for?
no, actually, they're a lot easier
Oh,
because hemp was never made completely illegal in Europe. So farming hemp was already there. We've literally had over 7,000 inquiries for license our intellectual property, and about half of those are from Europe. So one of the guys that I did the bamboo with, Tom Mathis, when he said, "Whenever you're ready, Greg, bring me on." And so I called Tom one day and I said, "Hey, I can't answer all these emails and phone calls coming from Europe. Uh, you said when I'm ready, so here we are." And so he joined our team 2.5 years ago and has been working out how to license our intellectual property to be able to set up facilities over in Europe. And it actually just came from some of our existing customers said, "Hey, it's kind of expensive to ship it over here and it doesn't fit my environmental goals by shipping something that far. Let's do this." So they've gone to their local government and looked for incentives for setting up healthy natural materials. And they came back and said, "Let's do it."
so how large is your team today?
We are 24 people plus my wife and I. She's our office manager. And so she's in charge of all the money. I'm in charge of making stuff and selling it. And then we have Tommy, Korn, and Matt, who are our first three interns that are now our plant manager, number one, plant manager, number two, and head of engineering, because we pulled them from the local university and they're all owners in the company. And then each facility has a supervisor, and then they each have 5 operators and 3 helpers.
Amazing. So when you look forward and what we're in 2024, so by like 2030, what do you hope to see?
With the bamboo, it ended up being 11,000 people
Hmm.
working there. I don't think this one will get that big because this will require automation because it's a higher cost area. I would imagine that if our goal is to build 4 of these facilities in the United States,
Hmm.
and we got our second patent approved not only for making flooring but for making structural panels, what we call OHB, oriented hemp board. We will have 4 flooring mills in the United States with an OHB mill beside it as your manufacturing cluster. So we'll be able to have $100 million in revenue in the US from those facilities, and then a similar amount of sales from licensed facilities overseas where you get a royalty fee.
And how much of the people buying, so if you look at the total population, what percentage do you think by 2030 will be making this choice versus alternate choices?
3%.
3%. 3%.
Yep.
Okay.
We'll always be a specialty item. We'll never be the cheapest. We'll never be the most convenient, but it will be what everybody wants.
And then if you have 3%, what do you expect in terms of health for, that population that is now making this choice to get the hemp wood versus those that are not?
Well, there's a clear movement, and what people actually care about more than sustainability is health.
Right.
That's something that people actually go out of their way to look for. When we have our Google search results, and if you get between 70 and 80,000 Google searches a month, and you have over 50% of those come from somebody looking for healthy flooring, we have like 16 or 17% of those somebody looking for sustainable flooring. So the health impact is real and is gaining momentum. The sustainability aspect of what we're doing, I living on an organic farm. That's what we do. But the reality is that changes whenever the administration changes, whether it's your local or your federal. And that's going to go back and forth because people told me with the bamboo that we were going to be trading carbon credits in 2006 when it was listed on the stock exchange. And that never happened. But that was what one investment bank was using as the cherry on top to lure other investors, saying, here's the kicker. And whenever you have a change in administration, that changes. And so the sustainability side is great. The healthy side is what people care about. Made in America is also, or locally made, is a very big attribute of it. And then being 20% harder than hickory. So for a hard surface like flooring, that's paramount to your success because it means it's more durable than your competition.
Right. So if our listeners or our founders wanted to get more information from you, Greg, what would be the best way to do that?
Easy. Check out hempwood.com,
Okay.
or you can go to our Instagram or Facebook, which are both hempwood as well. So we actually made up the word hempwood and then trademarked it and got the domains and all of the
Well
different
done.
social media URLs because it had never been done before. We're the only ones in the world doing what we're doing. So kind of all roads lead to Rome. And if you do look up hempwood in Europe, you can see hempwood UK. That's our license there. You can see hempwood Netherlands. That's our license there. We have one that's actually coming online. We have hempwood Belgium and hempwood in Bulgaria. So
Maybe Australia one day and New Zealand.
absolutely will be Australia. I actually own 20% of a wood recycling plant in Tasmania. And my
Wow.
mentor, who taught me how to do most of this stuff, is the chairman of the board of the Institute of Engineers of Australia. So he solves the big problems. When it gets past me and Jimmy Song, that did the bamboo with me, he's the chief engineer of the bamboo company that we were both at. And I sold my shares to start this thing. Um, yeah, we'll definitely set one up in Tasmania. We've already got it kind of planned out, putting it next to our Smart Oak facility.
That's exciting. So we're going to see you on a global level here. People are going to have more access to you. It might be a little bit cost prohibitive depending on what people's finances are, but I think on the whole, you're working to work with plants. It's better for people's health and it's better for the environment. You're not letting all those gases out too. So it sounds like a triple win, 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 win.
Yep, absolutely. The Achilles heel of what we're doing is natural materials typically don't cost less. So if you look at the total lifespan of the product, if you're going to have your hempwood floor for 100 years in your home, as compared to a vinyl floor, which gets changed out on average every 10 years,
Right.
it's not as cheap when you have to multiply it by 10. And so the same method that you have with Tesla that says, hey, it's not only your acquisition cost, but it's your cost of how long that's going to last when a combustion engine actually degrades faster than a electric engine because you're exploding oil inside of there or gasoline, as well as the cost of fueling it all the time. So if you look at the total product life cycle, it is less expensive, but the fast fashion world that we live in right now means that people buy fast food, people
Right.
buy fast fashion, people buy all the junk that you don't really need because it's cheap and convenient. And
Right.
then it turns you into having issues like I see around here where I live in the most obese state in the United States. Also happens to be the Mountain Dew capital, also happens to be the diabetes capital. And I love it here because of the nature and everything that you can do outdoors. But where we are, that's not the priority. And
Right.
so that's something that you always have to take into consideration, that your customer base is never going to be the majority because it's easier to do something that's not right.
Awesome, Greg. Thank you so much for chatting with me, sharing all this information. Before I redo my floors in my house, I'm going to have to call you, get an estimate for that.
Absolutely. We
Um,
have three different grades of flooring. It's
oh,
between $6 and $10 a square foot. So it's
okay.
not actually expensive. It's the same price as your domestic hardwood. The higher end is your custom stuff we do, or commercial. The lower end is what we call our character grade, like you see in my house right here. This
Mhm.
is our character grade, and that's because it has more of the natural rustic look with the knots and the color variation and all those things, which, in my opinion, actually looks better. It looks more natural.
I think it depends on the house, right? Some people have a modern house, some people have a traditional house, right? So I think based on that, it sounds like you have everything from custom options to different kinds of things. So we'll be in touch about that.
Absolutely.
We'll be in touch
Well,
about that.
thank you.
Thanks, Greg, so much. We look forward to continuing this conversation and sharing more information and a little bit more statistics, if possible, in our newsletter for our folks. So we'll catch you offline about that. But again, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having us, and enjoy California.
Will do.